The United States wanted to slow down China's growing power when it launched a trade war with China in 2018. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel with the bell notification turned on for more videos. The United States increased additional taxes, known as tariffs, on a number of Chinese-made goods, including electronics, toys, and machinery. The goal was to make these Chinese goods more expensive in America, so that fewer people would purchase them, which would harm China's economy. However, rather than disintegrating, China discovered new strategies for prosperity, altered its trade with the rest of the world, and the US initially believed that these additional taxes would make it difficult for China to sell its goods. But China persisted rather than concentrating solely on America. And now this change is affecting how many countries do business with one another. By 2023, China was exporting its goods to other nations. China continued to export roughly $3.4 trillion, nearly the same amount as before the trade war started. China began selling more to nations in Southeast Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America, such as Vietnam. Mexico and Brazil started purchasing a lot more Chinese goods, demonstrating that when one market closes, China finds many more to sell to. The Belt and Road Initiative, which has been in place since 2013, is another crucial instrument that has aided China during this period. China has constructed numerous ports, railroads, and highways in over 140 nations, including Kenya. In 2023, the countries that are a part of this Belt and Road Network will purchase roughly 40% of China's exports, thanks to a new railway that China built that connects Nairobi to the coast. This initiative aims to create enduring friendships, in addition to trade. Along with many other countries, the US attempted to halt China's technological advancement by prohibiting Chinese companies like Huawei from purchasing computer chips made in the US. These tiny chips support the operation of our computers, phones, and other gadgets. By preventing China from obtaining these chips, the US hoped to slow down China's technological advancement. But this strategy did not turn out as planned. In 2023, China invested a substantial sum of money, roughly $40 billion, to produce its own chips. These chips were first produced by companies like SMIC and Huawei's HiSilicon. But even though they are still a few years behind the best chips in the world, they are improving daily. On Chinese social media, many people rejoiced when Huawei unveiled a new phone that used a Chinese-made chip. On Weibo, which is similar to China's Twitter, someone wrote that they attempted to bury us, but were unaware that we were seeds simultaneously. When the United States prohibited China from purchasing the best technology, the entire nation banded together to find a solution. The Chinese government provided funding to new businesses, startups, schools started teaching more engineering, and factories worked extremely hard to keep up. In 2023, China filed over 2 million patents, indicating that its inventors came up with many new ideas and inventions. As a result, American chip companies like Intel and Qualcomm lost billions of dollars in sales, because Chinese chips are now in high demand. This collaboration brings to mind President Kennedy's request for the US to visit the moon, and everyone collaborated to realize that dream. And now China is using its technology in a similar way. Meanwhile, the United States and China have been at odds over trade, and Europe is undergoing an intriguing shift. The United States and Europe have been close allies for many years, and now they are beginning to develop a closer relationship with China. On matters like trade and security, Europe and the US collaborated closely, but in recent years, things have gotten harder. Many European leaders are starting to view China as a new friend after the US imposed tariffs and took other actions that hurt European businesses. About 25% of the electric cars sold in Europe in 2023 were made in China by Chinese companies like BYD and NIO. Germans on Twitter have made jokes about how Europe is now purchasing more from China, stating that, first we bought Russian gas, now Chinese cars, what's next, Chinese solar panels? It turns out that China already produces 80% of the world's solar panels. This expanding partnership between China and Europe demonstrates that while China is forming alliances with many developing nations in Africa, in addition to wealthy nations like those in Europe, Europe is also searching for new strategies to maintain a robust economy. The countries in Asia and Latin America, sometimes referred to as the Global South, require assistance in constructing roads, schools, and hospitals. China provides loans and construction assistance in exchange for access to vital resources like minerals and oil, as well as political support on a global scale. For instance, Nigeria borrowed roughly $5 billion from China to construct new railroads, despite the fact that some fear that this could lead to Nigeria becoming indebted. Many nations are intelligent and know how to use China's assistance without sacrificing their independence, as evidenced by the Nigerian president's tweet that read, "We're not stupid, we negotiate hard." A few of America's allies have also turned against the country as a result of the trade war and China's harsh response. For example, Australia's criticism of China's policies. Australia began selling more of its goods to nations like India, those in Southeast Asia, and even Saudi Arabia after China banned its coal and wine. A $10 billion tech deal was signed by a nation that was once very close to the US. And China, in 2023, indicates that even long-standing US allies are now finding it more appealing to collaborate with China. Because the world is no longer solely split between China and the US and nations like India. Turkey and Brazil are expanding quickly, and they want to cooperate with everyone rather than take sides. For instance, India sells computer programs to America, uses Chinese-made smartphones, and purchases oil from Russia. An Indian TikTok video featured a street market with Chinese smartphones, American oil cans, and Russian soda all in one location, with the caption, "This is the future. Everyone's business with everyone." This straightforward message illustrates that, despite China's strong response, there are still many issues facing the country. Its population is aging, 300 million people are expected to retire by 2035. Youth unemployment was about 21% in 2023, and multiple local governments in China owe roughly $9 trillion in debt. In 2022, the Chinese housing market collapsed as well, leaving many people with unfinished. Although these issues are severe, China learned to work independently when the US blocked Chinese technology, and instead developed its own when the US attempted to halt Chinese exports. China opened up new markets. According to a Chinese blogger, pressure creates diamonds. This implies that even in difficult times, they can contribute to the creation of something extremely valuable. Many nations now realize that relying solely on one partner is too risky, and would rather collaborate with numerous countries to maintain robust economies for the benefit of common people. More options, such as more affordable electric cars, faster internet, and even lower prices, may result from this new trading method for many goods. But it can also bring uncertainty. For example, factories may relocate from China to Vietnam, or from the United States to Mexico, and workers may need to acquire new skills. The lesson from all of this is that in the modern world, no one can win a trade war by attempting to compel others to comply with their wishes. Instead, the future belongs to those who can cooperate, exchange ideas, and maintain their flexibility in a world where wealth and power are dispersed among numerous nations. Collaboration is essential. Every nation must cooperate with others, even if they occasionally have disputes, to create a robust and stable global economy. But the US, the Canadian potential threat, serves as a warning. The United States has long benefited from having Canada as a close trading partner. But if Canada can use its power exports as leverage in a trade dispute, the US may need to reconsider its energy supply. This could entail increasing investment in renewable energy sources like solar and wind power, or looking for new international partners who can supply a steady supply of electricity. American officials are now stating that they need to be ready for anything because depending too much on one nation for energy is too dangerous. China's decision to cancel $690 billion in US imports marks a significant turning point in global trade, particularly in the ongoing economic tensions between the two largest economies in the world. The move, which appears to be a response to increasing trade restrictions and geopolitical disputes, could have far-reaching consequences for American industries that heavily rely on Chinese markets. Sectors such as agriculture, technology, and automotive manufacturing are expected to suffer the most. The US has long been a major supplier of agricultural products like soybeans, corn, and wheat to China, but with these imports now halted or significantly reduced, American farmers face a crisis. The ripple effects of this decision are already being felt, with stock prices in key industries experiencing volatility and concerns growing over potential job losses. As China shifts its import focus to other countries, such as Brazil for agricultural goods and Europe for high-tech products, the US economy could struggle to fill the void left by the declining trade relationship. The electric vehicle, EV, sector is another area where this trade shift will have a notable impact. US-based automakers have been eyeing China's massive market for EV expansion, but the recent import cancellations threaten these ambitions. China, the world's largest EV market, has been aggressively investing in its own homegrown electric vehicle companies, such as BYD and NIO, reducing reliance on foreign brands. The US had hoped to capitalize on this booming industry, with companies like Tesla leading the charge in Chinese EV sales. However, with the Chinese government focusing on self-sufficiency and limiting US imports, American automakers will face hurdles in maintaining their market share. Furthermore, China controls a significant portion of the global supply chain for critical EV components, such as lithium-ion batteries and rare earth minerals. If China decides to restrict exports of these essential materials to the US, it could disrupt production lines and increase costs for American EV manufacturers, setting back progress in the sector. The broader implications of China's trade policies go beyond just the electric vehicle market. The tech industry, which has long been intertwined between the two nations, is also at risk. American semiconductor companies, such as Nvidia, Intel, and Qualcomm, heavily rely on Chinese customers for revenue. With China ramping up efforts to develop its own semiconductor industry and cutting back on U.S. imports, these tech giants may see substantial revenue losses. In response, the U.S. has imposed restrictions on semiconductor exports to China, escalating the trade war further. This tit-for-tat economic strategy could result in supply chain disruptions, higher production costs, and reduced innovation. The cancellation of imports may also push China to strengthen economic ties with alternative partners, such as the European Union and Southeast Asian nations, diminishing America's influence in global trade. As the U.S. continues to implement measures to counter China's economic maneuvers, the potential for long-term economic decoupling becomes more apparent, raising concerns about stability in international markets. Ultimately, this drastic move by China could force the U.S. to reconsider its trade policies and economic strategies. With China being a major buyer of U.S. goods and services, the sudden reduction in exports could lead to slower economic growth and increased unemployment in affected industries. The Biden administration may have to rethink its approach toward trade negotiations and diplomatic relations with China to prevent further economic fallout. Meanwhile, businesses in the U.S. will likely seek alternative markets to offset losses, but finding replacements for China's vast consumer base will not be easy. The ongoing trade war highlights the vulnerabilities of globalization and interdependence, emphasizing the need for economic diversification and strategic planning. As the situation unfolds, both countries must navigate this complex landscape carefully, balancing economic interests with geopolitical ambitions. The impact of China canceling $690 billion in U.S. imports extends beyond individual industries and into the broader macroeconomic landscape. With such a massive reduction in trade, the U.S. faces a significant decline in export revenue, which could contribute to slower GDP growth. American businesses that depended on Chinese markets will need to scramble for alternatives, but shifting supply chains and finding new buyers is neither quick nor easy. In the short term, this trade disruption could lead to factory closures, layoffs, and a rise in economic uncertainty. This is particularly concerning for sectors like agriculture, manufacturing, and technology, which have historically relied on China's vast consumer base. Additionally, investors are already reacting to the news, with stock market fluctuations reflecting concerns over long-term economic stability. The Federal Reserve and policymakers may be forced to intervene with economic stimulus measures or trade incentives to mitigate the impact of these lost exports. The growing tensions between the U.S. and China have also raised fears of a prolonged trade war, which could further strain the already fragile global economy. With China seeking to diversify its import sources, the U.S. may struggle to regain its lost market position even if relations improve in the future. Other countries, such as Brazil, Russia, and members of the European Union, are likely to benefit from China's shift in trade policies as they step in to fill the void left by American suppliers. This could lead to a realignment of global trade alliances, weakening U.S. economic influence on the international stage. The shift away from U.S. imports also aligns with China's broader strategy of economic self-sufficiency, particularly in high-tech industries, where it has been aggressively developing its own semiconductor, EV, and artificial intelligence sectors. As China becomes less reliant on American goods, the leverage the U.S. once had in trade negotiations continues to diminish. For the American consumer, the consequences of these trade disruptions could manifest in multiple ways. First, industries affected by China's import cancellations may seek to offset their losses by raising prices domestically, leading to inflationary pressures. Additionally, if China retaliates by restricting exports of critical goods, such as rare earth minerals, electronic components, and medical supplies, American manufacturers could face higher production costs, which would ultimately be passed down to consumers. Supply chain disruptions have already shown their effects during the pandemic, and another prolonged trade dispute could exacerbate shortages and drive up prices on essential goods. This situation underscores the risks of economic interdependence and the potential fallout when major trade partners sever ties. Looking ahead, the U.S. government will have to decide how to respond to this dramatic shift in trade relations. Some lawmakers may push for aggressive countermeasures, such as higher tariffs on Chinese imports or increased subsidies for domestic industries to help mitigate losses. However, such actions could escalate tensions and lead to further economic retaliation from China. Alternatively, diplomatic efforts may be necessary to find common ground and prevent further damage to both economies. Regardless of the approach, it is clear that U.S.-China relations have entered a new phase, where economic nationalism and self-reliance are becoming dominant themes. The fallout from this trade dispute will likely be felt for years to come. reshaping global trade dynamics and forcing businesses to rethink their strategies in an increasingly uncertain economic environment. The cancellation of $690 billion in U.S. imports by China could have long-term repercussions on America's industrial base, potentially accelerating the decline of sectors that once thrived on international trade. Many U.S. manufacturers, especially those producing machinery, aerospace components, and industrial goods, had counted on China as a major customer. With these contracts now void, companies will be forced to either downsize or seek alternative markets, neither of which is an easy transition. Smaller businesses, which lack the financial flexibility of multinational corporations, may face insolvency if they cannot quickly replace lost revenue streams. Meanwhile, large corporations may opt to relocate production facilities to countries with stronger trade ties to China, potentially leading to further offshoring of American jobs. The overall effect is a weakening of domestic manufacturing, putting additional pressure on the U.S. economy and contributing to an already fragile job market. On the geopolitical front, China's decision signals a shift away from economic dependence on the United States and toward greater economic cooperation with emerging markets and regional allies. Countries in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia may benefit from China's redirected imports, as Beijing strengthens trade agreements and deepens investments in these regions. This could lead to a rebalancing of global trade power, with the U.S. losing its competitive edge in key industries. Additionally, China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has already positioned it as a dominant economic player in developing nations, and this latest trade move may accelerate that influence. If China successfully builds stronger trade ties with these nations, the U.S. could find itself increasingly sidelined in global economic discussions. The shift also aligns with China's long-term strategy of promoting its own currency, the yuan, as a viable alternative to the U.S. dollar in international trade, which could further erode American economic dominance over time. Another critical concern is the impact on U.S. financial markets. The stock market is highly sensitive to shifts in international trade, and a prolonged standoff between the U.S. and China could lead to further volatility. Already, industries that rely on exports to China are seeing declines in stock prices, as investors worry about future profitability. The uncertainty surrounding the trade relationship may also dampen business confidence, leading to reduced corporate investment and slowing economic growth. Additionally, with U.S. Treasury bonds being a key asset held by China, there are concerns about potential financial retaliation. If China were to gradually reduce its holdings of U.S. debt or shift its foreign reserves toward other assets, it could drive up borrowing costs for the U.S. government. This would put additional strain on an already rising national debt and could force policymakers to make difficult fiscal decisions, such as increasing taxes or reducing government spending. In the midst of this economic turmoil, American policymakers are faced with a tough choice: either escalate the trade conflict with China or seek a diplomatic resolution. Some economists argue that this could be an opportunity for the U.S. to focus on domestic economic revitalization, investing in homegrown industries and reducing reliance on foreign trade. Expanding production capabilities in sectors such as semiconductor manufacturing, electric vehicle battery production, and renewable energy could help offset some of the losses from reduced trade with China. However, such transitions take time, and in the short term, many industries will suffer from the sudden loss of one of their biggest trading partners. Moving forward, the U.S. must balance economic pragmatism with strategic geopolitical interests, ensuring that its industries remain competitive in an increasingly fragmented global economy. The next steps taken by both Washington and Beijing will determine whether this trade dispute escalates into a full-blown economic crisis, or if a compromise can be reached to stabilize global markets.